Indian philosophy, particularly the teaching of those books called the Upanishads, which are really the distilled essence of Hindu thought. The basis is called the self. And this word in Sanskrit is Atman, and that means self in the vastest possible sense and the most inclusive sense of the word. It means yourself, and it means also self as such, existence as such, the totality of all being. And of course, this is something that one cannot talk about in the sense of talking about it logically. You can talk about it. A poet can talk about anything, and the Upanishads are very largely poetry. Of course, everything in the world, knives and forks, tables and chairs, trees and stones, are indescribable. Korzybski referred to the physical world as the unspeakable world, which was really rather a funny name, because it has two edges. It's, of course, something you can't say anything about, that is to say, it is ineffable, but it's unspeakable also in the sense of the word meaning something taboo. We shall see as we go on wherein that taboo consists. But from the standpoint of logic, we can't say anything about everything. Because in order to say something about something and state it logically, you have to be able to put it in a class. Now, classes are intellectual boxes. Is it when you play games like animal, vegetable, and mineral, you've got there 3 boxes. And when you come to think of it, you don't know what any 2 of those boxes are really, without the third, or especially you don't know any one without another. Because in order to have a box, there must be what's inside the box and what's outside the box. And then by this method of contrast, we can make a logical discussion about it. All words, therefore, are labels on intellectual pigeonholes. But then, when you come to something which is completely all-inclusive, when you come to than which there is no whicher, to what fundamentally is, then you're without a box, and you can't talk logically. Of course, you can distinguish is from is not, but only in a very limited way, as I can say, I have a pen in my left hand, I do not have a pen in my right hand. And by this, from this, we abstract the idea of to be and not to be, is and isn't. But when we consider being with a capital B, this includes not only such ises as celestial bodies, but also such isn't as the space that encompasses them. And these two go together, as we shall see in more detail as the time goes on. But now, a perfectly logical person would therefore say that the notion of the self, the Atman, as the fundamental reality in which everything else exists, is meaningless. And of course, from a logical point of view, it is. We won't deny that to those critics of metaphysics who call themselves logical positivists. But at the same time, just because something cannot be put into a logical category does not indicate that it isn't real. The self, you see, bears somewhat the same relationship to the world as the diaphragm of the speaker in this radio bears to the music you've just been hearing. None of the music was about the diaphragm, and nobody said anything about there being a diaphragm. The diaphragm as such didn't come into the picture, and yet it was everything in the picture. All those different noises were vibrations of this thin film of metal. So also with your eardrum, So also with the apparatus of your eyes. Your eyes, you see, have no recognizable color. I mean, you may have brown eyes or blue eyes or green eyes, but the actual lens of the eye is what we call colorless. Of course, it might have a color, only because we are seeing that color all the time, we don't notice it. Just as if you wear sunglasses, after a while you cease to notice that you've got them on. The green of the sunglass, you see, becomes the colorless color. So one might ask then, just as you say, well, what is it on? What is the music on? Is it on tape? Is it on a speaker? Is it on a drum? Whatever the variations may be. We can ask the question, what are you all on? What is all this on? And the Hindus answer, it's on the self. Like we say, this one's on me. It isn't that there's only one self in the sense that is taught in a philosophy called solipsism. Solipsism is the idea that you are the only person who exists and everybody else is your dream. Nobody can prove that this isn't so, except I'd like to see a congress of solipsists arguing as to which one of them is really there. It isn't that, it's more complex than that. It's saying that the self in each one of you is really at root one. Just in the same way that you have all over your body millions of nerve ends. Each one of those nerve ends is, as it were, a little eye, because all the senses are fundamentally one sense. They are various forms of touch. And the most delicate of the forms of touch is, of course, the human eye. Then the ear, and so on down the list of the senses. Now imagine then every little nerve end is a little eye, and it gets its impression of the world, but it sends it all back into the central brain. Well, in a somewhat similar way, every person, every animal, every what the Hindus call sentient being, and even rocks are regarded as sentient beings in a very, very primitive form. Because when you say, take a piece of wood, which is supposed to be dead, or let's just take a real rock, and I go, that is the rock's response. And that indicates the rock's vibration, and that is a very, very primitive form of consciousness. The rock goes jangle all the way through and produces this noise. And that is consciousness, right down to the lowest. So all those forms that we see may be looked upon as the eyes that look out of one central self. Only, of course, in the body, in the human body, we can see the connections between the nerve ends and the brain. It's much more difficult to see the connection between one individual and another. If they're married, that's a little bit closer. But just all us human beings rattling around, we're not even rooted to the ground like trees. And therefore it's very easy for us to form the impression that I am only what is inside my bag of skin. And that my ego, myself, is a different self from yourself. And we're all, therefore, fundamentally disconnected. Now that, of course, is a superstition. It is an idea brought into us by our upbringing and by our various cultures. Because actually, from a perfectly physical point of view, not talking anything about metaphysics, no person exists alone. Or as the poet Donne put it, no man is an island. You exist, each one of you, strictly courtesy of your parents. And we need, in order to live, the cooperation of the community, of the society, not only of people, but also of plants, many kinds of animals, insects, bacteria, air, temperature, cosmic rays, every kind of thing that is around us is as essential to our being as our heads. You can draw little gradations of some things that are more essential and some things that are less essential. But fundamentally, everything is necessary for your existence. And so your apparent disconnection, the fact that you are not tied to other people with umbilical cords or some kind of wiring that gives you one mind. Nevertheless, we do have one mind, in the sense that, for example, all of us turn out to be approximately the same shape. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, a mouth, 2 hands, 2 legs, and so on. A haiku poem, Japanese haiku, says 100 gourds from the mind of one vine. And so it is with people. And so it is with everything in the world. That's just from a purely physical point of view. But going yet deeper, we find that it's somehow a necessity of thought that there be some sort of a something which is the common ground of all these universes, all these galaxies. And that ground is the self, as Hindus understand it, the Atman. Now that's quite a startling point of view, because what it's saying is, you see, that you are basically the works. Now, the Hindus do say that the self, the great self, is consciousness. But of course that does not mean consciousness in the sense of our ordinary everyday consciousness. Ordinary everyday consciousness is indeed a form of this kind of consciousness, shall we say a manifestation of it. But naturally, you see, you have going on all the time 2 types of consciousness. Number 1, the things you notice. And you notice things by having words or other symbols which you attach to them. It's very difficult to notice a thing for which you don't have a name and which you can't classify by some sort of image or shape. There are peoples, of course, who notice things that we don't notice. Eskimos have 5 different words for snow, because snow is very important to them. And to us, it's all just plain snow. Hopis have words for dry space, which is we don't have one word for that. There are all kinds of variations in language according to what people notice. So there's noticing consciousness, which we have courtesy of notation. But then there's also consciousness which doesn't notice, but nevertheless is highly responsive. You are responding at the moment to all kinds of stimuli coming to your nerve ends, which you don't notice at all. The way you are sitting is a response to unconscious stimuli. The way you adjust yourself and move, the way your heart beats, the way you breathe, the way you grow your hair, the way you color your eyes, the way you see. You don't know how you do that. You're doing it, but you don't know how it's done. So you see, consciousness in the ordinary sense, that is, say, conscious attention, doesn't notice everything. It only notices very little of the world. If I ask you, what did you do yesterday? You will give me a story which you will write out in words or say in words, and you will stretch that out in a long, thin line. And it will be a very, very attenuated and abstract form of what in fact you did yesterday. Because you did billions of things yesterday, but you remember only a very few, because you only noticed a very few. So therefore, just in the same way that conscious attention is not aware of all the other operations of the body, so in just that way, we are not aware of our connection, indeed our identity, with the fundamental self. We go to sleep at night, and then we wake up, and because the physical brain is still there, we remember everything that happened the day before. But if the physical brain decomposes, then we're what is called dead. And we say, well, that's the end of that. But when the leaves die and fall off the trees, or the fruit drops, next year, more leaves, more fruit. So in the same way, when you and I die, more babies later. If the whole human race dies, you bet your life. There are all kinds of things that feel that they're human, scattered throughout the multiplicity of galaxies. Because this universe is a peopling universe, just as an apple tree apples. But because we are unconscious of the intervals, we are not aware of the self with our conscious attention when conscious attention isn't operating. But still, just as you don't notice what your pineal gland, say, is doing at the moment, so in the same way, you don't notice the connections which underlie, which tie us all together, not only here and now, but forever and ever and ever and ever. The difficulty, and the basic reason why we don't notice the self, is that the self doesn't need to look at itself. A knife doesn't need to cut itself. Fire doesn't need to burn itself. Water doesn't need to quench itself. And a light doesn't need to shine on itself. So, this is the fundamental problem of having some sort of awareness of the self. Nevertheless, it is the whole contention of Indian philosophy, especially what we call Vedanta, that it is possible, in a certain way, to become aware of oneself in this deepest sense, to know that you are the totality. And this experience is the real substance of Indian philosophy as a whole, both Hindu and Buddhist. It is called moksha, which roughly means liberation. Liberation from the hallucination that you are just poor little me. To wake up from that kind of hypnosis and discover that you are simply something, your organism, your physical body, your conscious attention, which is your ego, that you are something being done by this vast, indescribable self, which is out of time, which has no beginning, no end, neither continues nor discontinues. It's beyond all categorization whatsoever. And so the Upanishads say, all we can say of it positive is the negative. Neti neti is not this, is not that. Anything, therefore, you can formulate, imagine, picture, will not be the self. So when you are trying to know the self, you have to get rid of every idea in your head. It doesn't mean, as some people seem to think, it that you have to get rid of every sense impression. It isn't as if you had to go into a catatonic state of total absorption. Of course, that can be done. But the full moksha, the full liberation, is when you come back out of absorption and see this everyday world just as it looks now, but see as clearly can be that it is all the self. It is comparable to something like this. If you look at the moon, you might imagine at full moon that you were looking at a disk until somebody points out to you that it's a ball. Now, nothing in the way of a sense impression has changed, but your understanding of it has changed radically. Sunrise is not the same event for a person who thinks that the Earth is the center of the solar system as it is for a person who knows that the Sun is the center of the solar system and that the Earth is center. The senses see the same event, but there is a different interpretation. And so more is seen. Seeing is done much more with the mind than with the eye. We see what we are taught to see. We see in terms of our ideological structure, our culture, our condition. And so all that condition teaches us to see the world in its separate. But you can be deconditioned from that and see just this same world that you're looking at now in its unity. There are a few hints that I can give right now as to how that happens. Only I shall go into this much more fully in the last section. You must understand, right to begin with, that when we talk of things, people, and houses, and water, and mountains, that thinking about them that way emphasizes their difference. It stresses differentiation. But you see, you don't really know what differentiation is unless you know what sameness is. Just as you don't know what to be is unless you know the meaning of not to be. And the boundaries of things which outline them, we say, well, I begin maybe up here, and above my head it's not me anymore. So this cranium thing, the skull with hair on top of it, divides me from space. True if you want to look at it that way, but it's equally true that my cranium joins me to space. Imagine what would happen to me if there weren't any space around me. My outline would thereupon disappear. Because you see, every boundary needs two sides, the inside and the outside. And you can't separate it. So boundaries are held in common. They join things as much as they divide them. Now, we are taught, you see, not to see that way. Our conscious attention is captured by figures within backgrounds, and it tends to ignore backgrounds. It is captured by things that move rather than things that are relatively still. And so when we see someone going up a hill, we say the man is going up the hill. We don't see also that the hill is coming down to the man. If you really know how to climb hills, you will feel the hill lifting you up as you climb. And that will make climbing much easier. Every pull is also a push, and every push is also a pull. When I put my hand out like that, it is correct to say that it is pulled out as that I push it out. You could see that easily in turning the steering wheel of a car. Are you pulling it or pushing it? Both. So, you can become aware of this tremendous interconnection. And that is one aspect, one fragment of what somebody who is moksha, who is liberated, sees. He sees, shall we say, that everything goes together. And that is, in a way, what we mean by relativity. Because relativity means relatedness. Just as fronts go with backs and tops with bottoms, insides with outsides, solids with spaces, so everything that there is goes together. It makes no difference whether it lasts a long time or whether it lasts a short time. A galaxy goes together with all the universe just as much as a mosquito, which has a very short life. From the standpoint of the self, time is completely relative. You can have, if you scale it down, as much time between two of those very rapid drum beats as you can in eons and eons and eons. It's all a question of point of view, or, to use a scientific expression, level of magnification. Change your magnification on your skin, take out a magnifying glass, and you don't see the familiar skin anymore. You see all the pores with hairs sticking out. Change it again and get a microscope, and you see cellular structure. Get an ion microscope, and you see molecules. And we know by other methods of observation that it can get smaller and smaller and smaller, and that the spaces between these minute units are so vast that they're comparable to the distances between the sun and planets. Scale. So also with time. So in this sense, there could be vast, vast universes full of empires and battleships and palaces and brothels and restaurants and orchestras in the tip of your fingernail. And on the other hand, we could be all going on in the tip of somebody else's fingernail. It's very important to understand not only the relativity of size and of time, but also of what there is. Now, as you know, the human senses respond only to a very small band of the known spectrum of vibrations. We know through instruments of quite a vast spectrum, but we, as I say, with our senses, see only a little of it. If our senses were in some way altered, we would see a rather different looking world. We can do this, of course. We can put on special lenses to enable us to see heat. And then we see all the heat radiations coming out of people. And we say, well, I never noticed that about you before. But so in the same way, you see, there are infinitely many possibilities of vibration and of organs sensitive to those vibrations. So that there could be worlds within worlds within worlds, spaces within spaces, just like the many, many wavelengths of radio and television, going on forever and ever in all directions, possibilities of it. But having senses and noticing is a selective process. It picks out only certain ones, just as when you play the piano. You don't take both arms and slam down all keys at once. you select. And so perception is a kind of piano playing. It is picking out certain things as significant, that is to say, as constituting patterns. And the whole universe seems to be a process of playing with different patterns. But whatever it does, whatever it plays, in whatever dimension, on whatever scale of time or space, it's all on the self. And the self is also known in Sanskrit as Brahman. This is a neuter word. Brahman is from the root BRH, which means to expand, to grow. It isn't quite clear exactly why this word was chosen. Sometimes there's a still better word for the self, which I like, is the word tat. Almost like tit for tat. Tat. Tat means that. We get our word that from the Sanskrit tat. And so when the baby comes into being, first of all, the first thing it says is da. Da. The baby is pointing. Da, da, da. And it's saying that. Look, isn't that marvelous? That. See? So that is the which than which there is no whicher. And so you get the formula in this Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Tat, Tvam, Asi. Which means tat, that, Tvam, Latin, you, Asi, you are that. Or that thou art. That art thou. So, in this sense then, every self is modeled on and is an expression of the one self, because you all feel individually that you're the center of the world. And everything else is seen in circles, circling out, sphering out from where you are. And that's, as it were, you call them microcosm, the little cosmos. But then in the same way, the macrocosm has a central self, although this is not central in the way we talk about centers in space. You see that? The center of a circle is in the middle of the circle, and the circumference is away from it. But you could use a phrase that the Christian theologians have used of God. That circle whose center is everywhere, whose circumference is nowhere. You could speak of Brahman that way. It isn't in the middle of the universe, spatially speaking. You might ask the question, where is the universe? Ever thought of that one? Where is it? Well, you can't say where, because everywhere has to be in relation to something. There would have to be another universe to say where this one is. But then, since those two together would constitute the universe, we wouldn't still be able to say where it was. It isn't anywhere. And so in that sense, the center isn't anywhere in space, locally. And furthermore, the kind of space we are dealing with is only one possible kind of space. It's the kind of space our physical organisms are attuned to. We are, you see, like the radio. We pick up what wavelength we're on. So then, when inquirers used to come to that great modern Hindu saint, Sri Ramana Maharshi, and they'd ask him all sorts of silly questions, like, who was I in my last incarnation? What will I be in my next one? He would always reply, Who is asking the question? Who are you? Find out, because that's the thing you need to know. As it were, dig down into the depths of your being and say, what is this that I call I? That's one of the very fascinating questions. It teases us out of thought to think about death in the sense of going to sleep and never waking up. Imagine that. And you find you can't. And yet it's a thought that although you can't get to grips with it, it remains fascinating. Also the question, how is it suddenly that you awakened into this world? Where were you before? In Zen Buddhism, they have the meditation problem, the koan. Before your father and mother conceived you, what is your original nature? And that's the same sort of weird question as what it would be like to go to sleep and never wake up. What was it like to wake up having not previously gone to sleep? It's very mysterious. But as you go on and plumb this question, you begin to develop the feeling that your existence is exceedingly odd. In many ways odd. Odd because it is here and it so easily might not have been. After all, if your father hadn't met your mother, would you be here?